The message hit my phone at 2:13 a.m., a screenshot of a conversation I had never seen, words I had never written, threats I had never made. By sunrise, my name was already poisoned. Group chats turned silent when I entered. Coworkers avoided eye contact. Then came the accusation that shattered everything: he sexually assaulted me. I remember staring at that sentence, feeling my chest cave in, knowing in that instant that truth no longer mattered, only perception did. But something felt off. The timestamps didn't line up. The phrasing wasn't mine. And buried in those screenshots was a detail so small, so careless, it became the thread that could unravel everything. He thought he had destroyed me with lies. He didn't realize he had left behind proof. And when I finally understood what he had done, and why, the real story became far more dangerous than the accusation itself. I woke up to silence. Not the peaceful kind. Not the kind that wraps around you gently before the world starts moving. This silence felt wrong. Heavy. Like something had already happened without me. My phone was face down on the nightstand, vibrating in short, relentless bursts. I remember staring at it for a few seconds before reaching over, my stomach already tightening for reasons I couldn't explain. 27 unread messages. 3 missed calls. And 1 notification that sat at the top, pinned like a warning I wasn't ready to read. "We need to talk. Now." It was from Daniel. I opened the messages. At first, nothing made sense. Fragments of confusion. Questions that felt loaded. Is this real? Tell me you didn't send that. Man. What were you thinking? Then someone sent it. The screenshot. I tapped it, and my entire body went cold. It looked like a chat conversation between me and someone saved as Lena. My name was right there at the top. My profile picture. My number. Everything about it looked real at first glance. But the words. They weren't mine. They couldn't be. The messages were aggressive, calculated. Lines that read like threats, like pressure, like someone trying to control another person. And at the bottom of the thread, a final message that twisted my stomach. "If you don't cooperate, I'll make everything public." My thumb hovered over the screen as I reread it again and again, hoping something would change. That it would suddenly make sense. That I'd remember sending it. But there was nothing. No memory. No context. No explanation. Just a growing realization that someone had put words in my mouth, and everyone else believed them. I sat up too fast, my head spinning as more messages flooded in. Notifications stacked on top of each other until I could barely keep up. Daniel was calling again. I answered this time. "What the hell is this?" he said immediately, no greeting, no hesitation. "I don't know," I said, my voice already breaking under the pressure. "I didn't send that." There was a pause on the other end. Not long. Just enough. Enough to feel the shift. "Look," he said, quieter now. "Careful. It doesn't look good." "It's fake," I said. "It has to be." Another pause. Longer this time. "People don't just fake entire conversations like that," he replied. I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers against my temple as if I could force clarity into my own mind. "Then explain it," I said. "Because I can't." He didn't answer right away. And that silence said more than anything else could have. By the time the call ended, I already knew something had broken. Not just trust, something deeper. Something harder to repair. I got out of bed and paced the room, the screenshot burned into my mind. Every word felt like a trap I didn't build but was somehow stuck inside. I opened the image again. This time slower. Careful. That's when I started noticing things. Small things. The spacing between messages looked slightly uneven. The timestamps felt off. Not wrong in an obvious way, but inconsistent if you really looked at them. And then there was the phrasing. One sentence stood out. "You don't understand how serious this is." I stared at it. It sounded like me, but not exactly. Too formal. Too stiff. Like someone trying to imitate my tone without actually knowing how I spoke. A copy. Not the original. My pulse quickened. For the first time since waking up, something cut through the panic. Not relief, not yet, but direction. This wasn't just random. Someone had made this. Which meant someone wanted it to be seen. Which meant this wasn't over. It was just beginning. My phone buzzed again. Another message. This one wasn't from a friend. It was from an unknown number. No greeting. No explanation. Just one line. "You should have stayed quiet." I felt the air leave my lungs as I read it. And then, almost immediately, another message followed. An image. Different from the first. This one wasn't a conversation. It was a post. My name. My photo. And beneath it, in bold text that made my hands start to shake. He sexually assaulted me. The room seemed to tilt. The noise in my head vanished, replaced by something far worse, a hollow, crushing certainty that whatever this was, it had just escalated beyond anything I could control. And somewhere, behind all of it, someone was watching me fall. I didn't sleep again after that. The accusation sat in my chest like something alive, expanding with every minute. The message, the post, the screenshot, they weren't just attacks. They were precise. Designed. And worst of all, they were working. By mid-morning, my world had already started shrinking. I tried calling Lena. Straight to voicemail. Again. Same result. A third time, I didn't even get a ring, just a dead line, like I'd already been blocked. That hit harder than I expected. Not because I thought she'd defend me, but because it meant she had already chosen a side. Or worse. She believed it too. I forced myself to focus. Panic wasn't going to help me. If this was fake, and I knew it was, then somewhere inside that screenshot, there had to be a mistake. Something real people wouldn't notice, but something I could prove. I sat at my desk and opened the image again. This time, I treated it like evidence. Not something to react to. Something to dismantle. The first thing I checked was the timestamps. At a glance, they looked normal. Late-night conversation. Gaps between replies that felt natural. But when I lined them up in my head, something didn't sit right. One message was marked at 1:12 a.m. The next response, supposedly mine, was at 1:12 a.m. too. No delay. No typing time. Just an immediate reply that perfectly addressed the previous message. That wasn't how conversations worked. Not real ones. I zoomed in further. The font weight shifted slightly between lines. Barely noticeable, but enough to catch my eye once I saw it. Like parts of the conversation had been stitched together from different sources. Then I noticed something else. The battery icon at the top of the screenshot. It was at 9%. But the timestamp showed the conversation spanning over 40 minutes. No charging symbol. No drop in percentage. Just frozen at 9% the entire time. I leaned back in my chair slowly, my heart starting to pound for a different reason now. This wasn't just fake. It was sloppy. Not in an obvious way. Not something anyone scrolling quickly would catch. But under pressure, under scrutiny, it would fall apart. If I could get someone to actually look at it. That was the problem. No one was looking anymore. They had already decided. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Daniel. HR scheduled a meeting. You need to come in today. Of course they did. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. I didn't do this. The typing dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then finally. Just. Come in. Bring whatever you have. Whatever I have. I looked back at the screenshot on my screen. Right now, all I had was doubt and a handful of inconsistencies no one cared enough to see. But that was enough to start. I grabbed my laptop and transferred the image, opening it in a proper editor. Zooming in further. Pixel by pixel. That's when I saw it. A faint line. Right between two messages. Almost invisible unless you were looking for it. A compression break that didn't match the rest of the image. Like two separate screenshots had been merged into one. My pulse spiked. Proof. Not complete, not yet, but real. This could be something. I quickly marked it, highlighting the inconsistency, preparing to show it to HR. To anyone who would listen. For the first time since this started, I felt a flicker of control. Not over the situation, that was already spiraling, but over the truth. And the truth was still there. Buried, distorted. But not gone. I shut my laptop and stood up, grabbing my jacket with hands that were still slightly shaking. If I moved fast enough, maybe I could stop this before it got worse. Before more damage was done. Before more lies took root. But as I reached for the door, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Another message. This one was different. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. You're looking at the wrong screenshot. I froze. A cold feeling spread through me as I slowly unlocked my phone, staring at those words. Wrong screenshot? My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Then another message came through. An image. I opened it. And this time, my breath caught completely. It was the same conversation. Same names. Same layout. But the messages were different. Not slightly. Completely. In this version, I wasn't threatening anyone. I was apologizing. Confused. Asking what was going on. And the other person, Lena, was the one pushing, the one escalating, the one twisting the conversation into something darker. My hands started to tremble as I compared the two images side by side. One of them had been edited. But now the question was worse than before. Which one had everyone else seen first? And who was controlling which version got out? By the time I walked into the office, I already knew how this would go. Not because anyone had said it outright. Because of the way people looked at me. Or didn't. The receptionist, who used to greet me every morning with a tired smile, kept her eyes locked on her screen as I passed. Two co-workers standing near the elevator went silent mid-conversation. One of them shifted slightly, just enough to put space between us. That was the first real confirmation. The screenshots had spread further than I thought. And they had landed exactly where they were meant to. Inside people's instincts. Inside their fear. Inside their judgment. I made it to the HR floor without speaking to anyone. My reflection in the elevator mirror looked unfamiliar, not because I had changed, but because I could see how others were starting to see me. Suspicion had a shape. And somehow, it had already wrapped itself around my face. The conference room door was slightly open. Daniel was inside. So was Marissa from HR. And someone else I didn't expect, a legal consultant I had only seen once before during a compliance training. That alone told me everything had escalated far beyond an internal conversation. "Come in," Marissa said, her tone neutral in a way that felt practiced. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. No one offered a handshake. No one asked how I was doing. Marissa gestured to the chair across from them. "Please, sit." I did. Slowly. Carefully. Like any sudden movement might be misinterpreted. There was a folder on the table. Thick. Organized. Prepared. They had been busy. Marissa opened it and slid a printed copy across to me. The screenshot. The edited one. I didn't need to look closely to recognize it. But I did anyway, forcing myself to stay grounded as those same false words stared back at me in ink this time. "We've received multiple reports regarding this conversation," she said. "As well as a public allegation posted earlier this morning." I nodded once. "It's fake." No hesitation. No build-up. Just the truth. The legal consultant leaned forward slightly. "You understand how serious this is?" "I do," I said. "Then help us understand," Marissa continued, "how your name, your contact, and your image are attached to this." I reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop, placing it carefully on the table. My hands were steady now, not because I felt calm, but because something inside me had shifted. If they weren't going to give me the benefit of the doubt, I would take it back myself. "I analyzed the image," I said, opening the file. "There are inconsistencies." Daniel glanced at the screen, then at me. There was something in his expression, not belief, not disbelief. Something in between. I zoomed in on the timestamps. 2 messages sent at the exact same minute, with no delay, I explained. That's not how real conversations work. Especially not like this. No reaction. I zoomed further. Highlighted the battery percentage. Stays at 9% across a 40-minute conversation. No change. No charging indicator. The legal consultant shifted slightly. Not convinced, but listening. Then I showed them the compression line. Faint. Subtle. But undeniable once you saw it. "This image was stitched together," I said. "At least 2 sources. Maybe more." Silence filled the room. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I had broken through. Then Marissa closed the folder. "We'll have our team review this," she said. Careful. Controlled. Non-committal. My chest tightened. "That's it?" She met my eyes. "These situations require thorough investigation." "And in the meantime?" I asked. Another pause. Then the words I had been dreading, even before I walked in. "We're placing you on administrative leave effective immediately." There it was. Not a verdict. But not neutrality either. A quiet, Professional way of saying we don't trust you right now. Daniel finally spoke, his voice lower than before. It's standard procedure. Standard. Like my life collapsing was just another checklist item. I exhaled slowly, leaning back in my chair as the weight of it settled in. Have you seen the other version? I asked. Marissa frowned slightly. What other version? I turned the laptop toward them and opened the second image. The one from the unknown number. The one that told a completely different story. This one, I said. They leaned in. And for the first time since I entered the room, I saw it. Real uncertainty. The legal consultant's expression tightened. Daniel's eyes narrowed as he scanned the messages. Marissa didn't speak for several seconds. Then quietly. Where did you get this? Someone sent it to me, I said. Anonymous number. That's not verifiable, the consultant replied quickly. This could also be fabricated. It could, I said. But so could the first one. That's the point. Silence again. Thicker this time. Because now there wasn't just one story. There were two. And they couldn't both be true. Marissa straightened slightly, regaining control of the room. We'll take both into consideration. But her tone had changed. Just enough for me to notice. Doubt had entered the system. And doubt was dangerous, not for me, but for whoever started this. The meeting ended shortly after that. No resolution. No reassurance. Just instructions, policies, and a quiet escort out of the building like I was already something they needed distance from. As I stepped outside, the air felt different. Colder somehow. Sharper. My phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. I didn't hesitate this time. I opened it immediately. A single message. They're about to choose which version becomes real. My grip tightened around the phone. Before I could respond, another message came through. This one wasn't text. It was a file. A video. I stared at it for a long second before pressing play. The screen flickered. A dimly lit room. A desk. A monitor. And someone sitting in front of it. Editing the screenshots. My breath stopped. The angle was partial, just enough to see the hands, the software, the conversation being manipulated in real time. Messages being rewritten. Rearranged. Manufactured. Proof. Actual proof. But just as the person leaned slightly into frame, just enough for their face to almost be visible. The video cut to black. And a final message appeared on my screen. You're not the only target. The video replayed in my mind long after the screen went black. Not the whole thing. Just fragments. The cursor moving with intent. The messages shifting like they meant nothing. Reality being rewritten in real time. Proof existed. That should have given me relief. It didn't. Because whoever sent it to me hadn't sent enough. They had stopped right before it mattered most. Right before the face. Right before the truth could stand on its own without question. Which meant one thing. This wasn't help. It was control. I stood on the sidewalk outside the office, cars passing like nothing had changed, like my life hadn't just split into two versions, one real, one manufactured, and the world had already chosen the wrong one. My phone felt heavier in my hand now. Not because of the weight, but because of what it carried. Evidence. Or something close to it. And somewhere behind that evidence. A person who was watching all of this unfold, deciding what I got to see and when. I opened my messages again and typed fast. Who are you? The reply came almost instantly. Someone who knows how this ends if you don't move fast. My jaw tightened. Then show me everything. 3 dots appeared. Stayed. Disappeared. Then. Not yet. Of course. I exhaled sharply, running a hand through my hair as frustration built under my skin. Then why send anything at all? I muttered under my breath. No answer came this time. Just silence again. But it didn't last long. Because the world wasn't waiting for me to catch up. By the time I got home, the situation had already escalated. Again. I knew before I even opened social media. The notifications alone told me enough. Hundreds now. Maybe more. Mentions. Tags. Messages from numbers I didn't recognize. I hesitated for a moment before opening the first one. A post. Shared dozens of times. Then hundreds. Then more. My name was there again. My photo. But this time, it wasn't just about blackmail. This time, it was worse. Much worse. The words sat in bold, impossible to ignore. He sexually assaulted me. I felt something inside me drop. Not fear. Not exactly. Something deeper. Something heavier. Because this wasn't just reputation damage anymore. This was irreversible. I scrolled further, my hands moving on instinct while my mind struggled to keep up. Comments flooded in underneath the post. I knew something was off about him. Expose him. Disgusting. He should be in jail. Each one landed like a verdict. No trial. No evidence. No hesitation. Just judgment. I locked my phone and set it down on the table, staring at nothing for a long moment. This was the part no one prepared you for. Not the accusation itself. Not even the lies. But the speed. How fast people were willing to believe the worst version of you without ever asking a single question. My phone buzzed again. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something told me not to. Another message from the unknown number. Now you understand the scale. I picked up the phone slowly. You knew this was coming. A pause. Then. I told you. You're not the only target. My eyes narrowed slightly as I read that again. Not the only target. Who else? I typed. This time, the reply took longer. Long enough to make me think they wouldn't answer at all. Then finally. Look closer at the video. I immediately reopened the file, my heart starting to pound again as I pressed play. Same dim room. Same desk. Same hands. But this time, I wasn't watching for the obvious. I wasn't looking for the face. I was looking for everything else. The background. The details. Anything that didn't belong. The monitor reflected faintly on the desk surface. The software interface flickered as edits were made. Windows opened and closed with precision. Then I saw it. Not in the foreground. In the reflection. A second screen. Faint. Blurred. But visible enough if you paused at the right moment. I froze the frame, zooming in as far as I could without losing clarity completely. There were files open on that second screen. Multiple conversations. Different names. Different contacts. All being edited. All being rewritten. My pulse spiked. This wasn't just about me. This was a system. A pattern. A coordinated effort to fabricate evidence across multiple targets. And suddenly, the accusation against me didn't feel random anymore. It felt selected, engineered. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Now ask yourself the right question. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. The right question. Not who did this. That was too simple. Too small. The real question was bigger. More dangerous. Who benefits from all of this? The moment that thought settled in. Something else clicked. Not from the video. From memory. A meeting. Weeks ago. A conversation I hadn't thought about since. About internal audits. About financial discrepancies. About someone pushing too hard in the wrong direction. My breath slowed as the pieces began to shift into place. This wasn't just about destroying me. It was about stopping me. Silencing me. Before I could expose something I didn't even realize I had already gotten too close to. My grip tightened around the phone as a new realization hit even harder than the last. If that was true, then the accusation wasn't the end goal. It was the cover. And whatever was hiding behind it was big enough to justify destroying multiple lives to keep it buried. Another message came through. Short. Precise. Now you're starting to see it. I stared at those words, a cold certainty settling deep in my chest. This wasn't just a fight to clear my name anymore. This was something else entirely. Something bigger. Something that had already pulled me in whether I wanted it or not. And if I didn't move carefully now, I wouldn't just lose my reputation. I might lose the only chance I had to expose what was really happening behind all of this. I didn't turn the lights on. The apartment stayed dim as I sat at the kitchen table, the glow of my laptop the only thing cutting through the dark. It felt appropriate. Like I was already operating outside the normal world, somewhere between truth and fabrication, trying to separate one from the other before it swallowed me completely. The accusation still echoed in my head. The post. The comments. The certainty in people's voices when they condemned me. But I couldn't afford to stay there. Emotion was a luxury now. Precision was survival. I opened the video again. Not from the beginning. From the middle. Then the end. Then back again. I watched it 5 times in silence, forcing myself to ignore the obvious and focus on what didn't belong. Patterns. Timing. Movement. The editor's hands were steady. Too steady. Not someone improvising. Someone practiced. The software interface flickered between windows quickly, but not randomly. There was a rhythm to it. A workflow. Like they had done this before. Many times. I paused on a frame where a message was being rewritten. The text cursor blinked once. Twice. Then the sentence changed. Clean. Immediate. No hesitation. That wasn't normal typing. I leaned closer to the screen, narrowing my eyes as I rewound a few seconds and played it again. Slower this time. There. For a fraction of a second, just before the message updated, a small overlay appeared near the cursor. Not part of the messaging app. Something else. I paused again and zoomed in as far as I could. The image degraded slightly, pixels stretching under pressure, but the shape was still there. A tool. An editing plugin. Not something built into a phone. Not something casual users even knew existed. My pulse picked up. This wasn't just someone taking screenshots and altering them manually. This was software-assisted manipulation. Faster. Cleaner. Harder to detect unless you knew exactly what to look for. Which most people didn't. Which meant whoever did this wasn't just trying to lie. They were trying to make the lie unquestionable. I leaned back slowly, exhaling through my nose as the scope of it sharpened. This wasn't personal in the way I first thought. It was professional. Systematic. Designed to hold up under pressure. Unless someone pushed harder than expected. My phone buzzed again. I didn't look at it right away. Instead, I opened the screenshot, the fake one, and placed it side by side with the video frame. Same interface. Same structure. Same layout. But now that I knew what to look for, I started seeing it everywhere. Tiny inconsistencies in text alignment. Slight variations in message spacing. Imperceptible shifts in font rendering that only showed up when you zoomed in far enough. All signs of something being generated, not captured. My breathing slowed as the realization locked in. This wasn't just edited. It was constructed. And suddenly, the earlier question came back, clearer than before. Who benefits? Because whoever it was. They had resources. Tools. Access to software that wasn't publicly available. Which narrowed the field. A lot. I finally picked up my phone and checked the message. Same number. Same silence before impact. You found it. I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening slightly. You knew I would. A pause. Then. I needed to be sure. Something about that answer didn't sit right. Sure of what? I typed. The response came slower this time. Like they were choosing their words carefully. That you're not as easy to break as the others. The others. There it was again. Not just me. Never just me. I stood up and started pacing, the energy building again under my skin, but different now. More focused. More dangerous. Who are the others? 3 dots appeared. Stayed. Then disappeared. No answer. Of course. I stopped pacing and looked back at the laptop. The video. The screenshots. The pattern. If this was happening to multiple people, then somewhere, there had to be overlap. A connection point. Something linking all the targets together. Work? Projects? Internal data? My mind moved quickly now, retracing the last few months. Meetings. Reports. Conversations I had dismissed at the time because they didn't seem important. Until now. Then it hit me. Not a memory. A name. One that kept appearing in different contexts. Different departments. Different discussions that didn't seem related, but now felt like pieces of the same system. Evan. Not a close colleague. Not a friend. But always there. Always adjacent. Always involved just enough to matter, never enough to stand out. My chest tightened slightly as I thought about it. Too convenient? Maybe. But right now, it was the first real direction I had. I grabbed my phone again. Evan. What do you know about him? This time, the reply came immediately. No delay. No hesitation. Like they had been waiting for me to ask that exact question. You're getting closer than you should. A chill ran down my spine. Not because of the warning itself. Because of what it confirmed. I was right. And whoever was behind that number already knew it. Before I could respond, another message came through. Short. Urgent. Check your email. Now. I turned back to my laptop instantly, opening my inbox with a rising sense of dread I couldn't explain yet. One new message. From HR. Subject line, urgent update, formal investigation. I clicked it. And as I read the first line, my stomach dropped. They weren't just investigating anymore. They were escalating. Externally. Law enforcement had been notified. And attached to the email was a new piece of evidence. Something I had never seen before. Something worse than the screenshots. A file labeled simply audio_proof. MP3. My hand hovered over the trackpad. For a moment, I didn't move. Because deep down, I already knew what it would sound like. Not my voice. But something close enough to convince everyone else it was. I pressed play. And as the first words filled the room, my blood ran cold. The voice was mine. At least, that's what anyone would say after hearing it. Same tone. Same pacing. Even the slight pause I had when choosing words. It was all there, replicated with terrifying precision. But I knew better. Not because I could prove it yet, but because I could feel it. It wasn't me. It was too clean. Too controlled. Like someone had studied me, stripped away the imperfections, and rebuilt my voice into something sharper. Something more convincing than the real thing. I stopped the audio halfway through. I couldn't let it finish. Not yet. My reflection stared back at me from the dark screen, eyes hollow, jaw tight. For a moment, I understood exactly how this worked. They didn't need perfect evidence. They just needed evidence that felt real enough. And this would feel real to anyone who heard it. My phone buzzed. That's new. I exhaled slowly. You didn't send this. No. A pause. Which means they're accelerating. My grip tightened around the phone. Accelerating. That word carried weight. Urgency. Mistakes. Because when people rushed, they slipped. And I needed them to slip. I opened the audio file again, this time forcing myself to listen past the surface. Not the words. Not the accusations woven into the tone. The background. There was always something in the background. I pressed play. Closed my eyes. Focused. At first, nothing. Just the voice. The illusion. Then. A faint hum. Low. Consistent. Not random noise. Something mechanical. I replayed the first 10 seconds. There it was again. A pattern. 3 seconds of silence. Then a soft electrical buzz. Then silence again. I leaned forward, my pulse starting to climb. That wasn't part of the recording. That was the environment. I grabbed my laptop and isolated the audio, boosting the background frequencies. Stripping away the voice as much as I could. The hum became clearer. Rhythmic. Structured. Familiar. Too familiar. I froze. Because I had heard that sound before. Not recently. But enough times for it to stick somewhere in my memory. Fluorescent lighting. Old. Slightly faulty. The kind that flickered just enough to create that exact electrical pattern. My mind moved fast now, pulling through places, rooms, buildings. Anywhere I had heard that same sound. Office floors. Storage areas. Conference rooms. Then it clicked. Not just any room. A specific one. Lower level. Restricted access. Rarely used unless you had clearance. The internal audit archive. My chest tightened as the realization hit. That room wasn't public. Not even within the company. Access was logged. Monitored. Which meant if someone had been in there recording, there would be a record, unless they had the authority to bypass it. Or the power to erase it. My phone buzzed again. You heard it. I didn't reply immediately. Because now, the pieces were starting to align in a way that felt too deliberate to ignore. The screenshots. The software. The video. The audio. All of it required access. Not just technical skill. Institutional access. My thoughts circled back to the same name. Evan. Always present. Always adjacent. Always involved just enough. I grabbed my jacket again without thinking, already moving toward the door. I didn't need confirmation anymore. I needed proof. Real proof. The kind no one could dismiss. The kind that didn't rely on belief. The archive building was quiet when I got there. Too quiet. Security at the entrance barely glanced at me. Either they hadn't been told yet. Or they had, and didn't care. Both possibilities felt dangerous. I made my way downstairs, each step heavier than the last. The hum hit me before I even reached the door. Faint. But unmistakable. The same rhythm. The same pattern. My heart started pounding as I approached the access panel. For a second, I hesitated. Because once I stepped inside, there was no going back to denial. No pretending this was still uncertain. I pressed my badge against the scanner. A red light flashed. Access denied. Of course. I let out a quiet breath, glancing around the empty hallway before stepping back slightly. If Evan was involved, he would still have access. Which meant one thing. He had been here. Recently. My phone buzzed again. Don't go in. Too late for that. Why? I typed. The response came instantly. Because he knows you're coming. A cold wave moved through me as I read that. Slow. Deliberate, what do you mean? No answer. Instead. Footsteps. Behind me. I turned slowly. And there he was. Evan. Standing at the end of the hallway, just far enough to feel intentional. Not surprised. Not confused. Waiting. My chest tightened as our eyes locked. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, finally, he smiled. Not wide. Not obvious. Just enough. Enough to confirm everything I had been piecing together. Looking for something? He asked calmly. My pulse thundered in my ears as I stared at him, every instinct telling me the same thing at once. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was him. But as I opened my mouth to speak, something else hit me. Harder than anything before. Because if Evan was standing right here, then who had been sending me the messages this entire time? For a second, everything stopped. Not the world. Not the hallway. Just my ability to process what I was looking at. Evan stood there like he belonged in that moment. Calm. Composed. Like this wasn't an encounter, it was a checkpoint. Something he had expected, prepared for, maybe even orchestrated. Which meant one thing. He wasn't reacting to me. He was ahead of me. Looking for something? He repeated, taking a slow step forward. His voice was steady. Too steady. I forced myself not to answer right away. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because anything I said now would give something away. And I didn't know how much he already knew. So I did the only thing I could. I matched him. I should ask you the same thing, I said. A small shift in his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. Like he had been waiting for me to say exactly that. Careful, he replied. You're already under enough pressure. There it was. Confirmation without admission. My jaw tightened slightly. Funny, I said. Because it feels like someone's trying really hard to make sure of that. He didn't respond immediately. Just studied me for a moment, his eyes scanning like he was measuring something. Not my words. My reaction. Then he nodded once. Almost approving. You're connecting things faster than I expected, he said. Not denial. Not even deflection. Just acknowledgement. My pulse spiked. You've been busy, I said quietly. A faint smile touched his face again. So have you. Silence settled between us. Heavy. Not empty, loaded. Like both of us understood that whatever came next would define everything after. I took a step forward. Not aggressive. Not hesitant. Just enough to close the distance slightly. The screenshots, I said. The audio. The video. His eyes didn't move. Who else? That was the question that mattered now. Not just for me. For everything. Because this wasn't about proving I was innocent anymore. It was about proving this wasn't isolated. That it was systemic. Deliberate. He exhaled slowly, glancing briefly toward the archive door before looking back at me. "You're asking the wrong question," he said. Of course he would say that. "They're connected," I pushed. "Multiple people. Fabricated evidence. Coordinated release. That's not random." "No," he agreed. My chest tightened. "Then what is it?" Another pause. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Containment." The word landed wrong. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I understood it too well. "What exactly are you containing?" I asked. He tilted his head slightly, like he was considering how much to say, or whether to say anything at all. Then, damage. A cold realization started forming in my chest. "What damage?" This time, his smile faded. Not completely, just enough to change the tone of everything. "The kind that doesn't stay internal," he said. My mind raced. Internal audits. Financial discrepancies. Departments overlapping where they shouldn't. And suddenly, it all aligned in a way that made my stomach drop. "You're burying something," I said. Not a question. A statement. His silence confirmed it more than any answer could have. "And anyone who gets close," I continued slowly, "becomes a liability," he finished. There it was. Clear. Direct. No denial left. My hands curled slightly at my sides as the full weight of it hit me. This wasn't just about me being framed. It was about me being removed. Discredited so completely that anything I had seen, anything I could expose, would never be taken seriously again. And not just me. Others too. "How many?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. Which meant the number was worse than I expected. I took another step forward. "You think this holds?" I said. "You think none of this comes back to you?" For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not fear. Not exactly. Annoyance. "You're still thinking small," he said. My chest tightened. "What does that mean?" He looked at me then, really looked this time. And when he spoke, his voice dropped slightly. "It means I'm not the one you should be worried about." A chill ran through me. Because that answer didn't create relief. It made everything worse. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. Loud. Sharp. Cutting through the tension like a warning shot. Evan's eyes flicked down to it for just a second. Then back to me. "Answer it," he said. Not a suggestion. An instruction. My pulse hammered as I slowly pulled the phone from my pocket. Same number. Still unknown. I hesitated for half a second. Then opened the message, a single line. "He's not the architect." My breath caught. I looked up at Evan instantly. His expression hadn't changed. But now I saw it differently. Not control. Position. Like he wasn't at the top of this. He was part of it. A piece. And suddenly, the ground under everything I thought I understood shifted again. Because if Evan wasn't the one pulling the strings, then whoever was had just been watching both of us this entire time. Another message came through. Faster this time. And you're running out of time. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening as the implications hit all at once. This wasn't just bigger than me. It was bigger than Evan. Bigger than the company. And whatever I had stumbled into was already moving faster than I could keep up with. I looked back at Evan, my voice lower now. "Then tell me who is." For the first time since this started. He didn't have an answer. Or worse. He wasn't allowed to give one. And in that silence, I realized something far more dangerous than any accusation, any evidence, any lie that had been thrown at me so far. The system I was trying to expose was designed to survive people like me. And if I didn't find a way to break it soon, it was going to erase me completely. The silence between us didn't last long. It couldn't. Because once you realize you're standing inside something bigger than you, something designed to erase people without leaving a trace, you don't get the luxury of stillness. You either move. Or you disappear. Evan stepped aside first. Just slightly. Enough to break the tension without ending it. "Go home," he said. I didn't move. "That's your advice?" "It's not advice," he replied. "It's the only move you have left if you want to stay ahead of this." My jaw tightened. "You expect me to walk away?" "I expect you to understand the difference between what you can prove and what will get buried with you if you push it the wrong way." That landed. Not because I agreed with him. Because part of me knew he wasn't wrong. I held his gaze for a moment longer, then turned without another word and walked away. Not because I trusted him. But because I needed distance to think. And right now, thinking clearly was the only weapon I had left. Back home, the apartment felt smaller than before. Like the walls had moved in while I was gone. I didn't sit. Didn't stop. I went straight to my laptop and opened everything at once, the screenshots, the video, the audio, the messages. All of it. If this system was built to survive exposure, then I needed to stop looking at it like a victim. And start looking at it like an architect. Patterns. Every system has them. Even the ones designed to hide. I pulled up the video again, this time focusing only on the secondary screen reflection. Frame by frame. Slowing it down to the point where every flicker became visible. There were multiple files open. Conversations being edited. Names I didn't recognize. At first, they felt random. But they weren't. They couldn't be. Nothing about this was random anymore. So I wrote them down. Every name I could catch. Every partial contact. Every timestamp. Then I cross-referenced them. Internally. Projects. Departments. Access logs I still had cached locally from earlier audit reviews. At first, nothing. Then something small. 2 names linked to the same project. A financial review flagged 3 months ago. I kept going. Another overlap. Different department. Same external vendor. My pulse started to rise again, not from panic, from recognition. This wasn't about individuals. It was about proximity. Everyone in those files had touched the same set of data. Different angles. Different roles. But the same core system. I leaned back slowly, the realization building piece by piece. The accusations weren't random attacks. They were targeted removals. Anyone who got too close to that data was discredited, erased before they could connect the full picture. Before they could prove anything. And then it hit me. Harder than anything before. I wasn't chosen because I was vulnerable. I was chosen because I was close. Closer than the others. That's why mine escalated faster. That's why the second accusation hit so quickly. Because I had already seen enough to become dangerous. My hands hovered over the keyboard as another thought pushed its way forward. If that was true, then the system didn't just react. It predicted. It identified risks before they fully formed. Which meant it was monitoring more than just actions. It was monitoring behavior. Access patterns. Search history. Internal flags. My chest tightened as I opened one of the old audit tools I still had limited offline access to. Not enough to pull live data. But enough to see historical logs. I filtered by my own activity. And there it was. A flag. Subtle. Buried. Timestamp 2 days before the first screenshot appeared. A behavioral anomaly marker. My breath slowed. Not fear this time. Something colder. They had marked me before they moved against me. This wasn't damage control. This was preemptive. Calculated. And suddenly, the biggest question shifted again. Not who benefits. Not even what are they hiding. But something far more dangerous. Who built the system that decides who gets erased? My phone buzzed. I didn't look at it right away. Because I already knew. Whoever was on the other side of that number was part of this in a way I didn't fully understand yet. I picked it up slowly. One new message. Now you see it. I stared at the screen, my reflection faint in the glass. You knew from the start. A pause. Then. I helped build it. Everything inside me went still. Not shock. Not confusion, something sharper. Because that one sentence didn't just answer a question. It rewrote everything. This person wasn't just watching. They weren't just helping. They were part of the system that destroyed me. My fingers tightened around the phone. Then why help me? This time, the response came slower than ever before. Long enough to feel intentional. Measured. Because you weren't supposed to survive it. A chill ran through me as I read that again. Not supposed to survive. Which meant others hadn't. Which meant this system had already worked. Multiple times. I swallowed slowly, forcing myself to stay focused. Who's above Evan? The typing dots appeared. Stayed. Then disappeared. No answer. Instead, another message came through. Check the metadata in your audio file. I frowned slightly, immediately turning back to my laptop. Metadata? Of course. The part no one thinks to alter properly unless they're perfect. I opened the file properties, digging into the deeper layers most people never touch. Timestamps. Encoding details. Device signatures. At first, it looked clean. Too clean. Then I saw it. A single field. Missed. Overlooked. Or maybe left there on purpose. My breath caught as I read it. Not a person. Not a direct name. But something far more specific. A system ID. Internal. Traceable. And tied to only one place in the entire company. My chest tightened as the final piece clicked into place. Because this wasn't just someone above Evan. This was someone embedded deeper than anyone would ever suspect. Someone who didn't just use the system, but controlled it from the inside. My phone buzzed one last time. Now you know where to look. I stared at the metadata field, my pulse steady now in a way that felt almost unnatural. Because fear had been replaced. Not with confidence. With certainty. This was no longer about defending myself. It was about exposing something that had already destroyed others before me. Something that had nearly destroyed me. And now, I finally had a direction. But as I reached for my jacket again, another thought stopped me cold. Because if this system was designed to predict threats, and I had just uncovered its core, then somewhere, right now, it was already predicting my next move. By the time the realization settled, I was already moving. Not out of panic. Not out of fear. Out of clarity. If the system could predict behavior, then I had to stop behaving predictably. That was the only way forward. I closed everything on my laptop except the audio file. Not because it was the strongest piece of evidence, but because it was the weakest point in their construction. Metadata was never meant to be seen. Which meant it was the one place they didn't expect anyone to look closely enough. I copied the file. Duplicated it. Stripped it. Preserved the original. Then I did something they wouldn't anticipate. I stopped trying to prove I was innocent. And started proving they were guilty. The next few hours blurred together. I built a map. Not on paper, in layers. Connections between flagged employees. Shared access points. Overlapping timestamps. The system ID from the metadata sitting at the center like a fingerprint they didn't realize they had left behind. Every line led back to the same place. A secured internal server cluster. Not listed in standard infrastructure reports. Not visible unless you knew exactly where to look. Which meant it wasn't just hidden. It was intentionally excluded. My pulse stayed steady as I worked. Because at this point, emotion was useless. This wasn't about how I felt anymore. It was about execution. I opened a secure channel, one I hadn't used in years. Not since early audit work when external compliance teams needed anonymous reporting paths that couldn't be intercepted internally. They called it a dead route. No logs. No tracebacks. No internal visibility. Exactly what I needed. I packaged everything. The original screenshot with marked inconsistencies. The second version that contradicted it. The video showing active manipulation. The audio file with untouched metadata. And the map, the full pattern tying multiple targets to the same system. But I didn't send it yet. Because this couldn't be a single drop. It had to be a collapse. My phone buzzed again. You're moving faster now. I didn't reply. Not immediately. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting to them. I was ahead. You said I wasn't supposed to survive this. 3 dots appeared. You weren't. Then you miscalculated. A pause. Longer this time. Then. No. That answer stopped me. Not because of what it said. Because of what it implied. I stared at the screen, my mind shifting again. Then what am I? The response came slower than anything before. Deliberate. A variable. My chest tightened. A variable. Not part of the system. Not fully outside it. Something unpredictable, something that could break it. Or be absorbed by it. I exhaled slowly, setting the phone down as the final phase became clear. This wasn't just exposure. It was leverage. I sent the package. Not to one place. To 3. External compliance. An independent forensic firm. And a regulatory body that didn't answer to corporate influence. Then I waited. Not long. Because systems like this don't stay quiet when they're threatened. They react. Fast. My phone lit up first. Not a message. A call. Unknown number. I answered. Silence. Then a voice I hadn't heard before. Calm. Controlled. You've made a mistake. Not a question. Not a warning. A statement. I leaned back slightly. No, I said. I corrected one. A pause. You think sending fragments changes anything? Fragments. So they didn't know. Not yet. Good. I think you're about to find out how much it changes, I replied. Another pause. Then the shift. Subtle. But real. You don't understand what you're interfering with. There it was. Not denial. Concern. I understand enough, I said. And so will everyone else soon. The line went quiet. Then. You've already lost everything. I looked around the apartment. Empty. Silent. Ruined in ways I hadn't even begun to process yet. Then I have nothing left to take from me, I said. And hung up. The response came faster than I expected. Not publicly. Not yet. Internally. Leaks. Questions. Requests for verification that couldn't be quietly dismissed. The system started to fracture. Not collapse, not yet, but strain. Because once multiple external bodies started asking the same questions. Containment stopped working. And panic set in. My phone buzzed one last time. You forced movement. I stared at the message, my pulse steady. You said I was a variable. A pause. Then. Variables break systems. I allowed myself a small breath. Not relief. Not victory. Just recognition. Because this wasn't over. Not even close. The system was still there. Still powerful. Still capable of pushing back harder than anything I had seen so far. But now. It wasn't invisible anymore. And neither was I. That night, for the first time since this began, I didn't feel like I was being erased. I felt like I was being watched for a different reason. Not as a target. As a threat. And as I closed my eyes, one final thought settled in with absolute clarity. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about making sure no one could ever do this again. But as sleep finally started to pull me under, my phone vibrated once more on the table beside me. A final message. Short. Precise. And more dangerous than anything that had come before. They're coming for you publicly now. The storm didn't build slowly. It detonated. By morning, everything was public. Not just the accusation, that had already done its damage, but the counterweight I had released. The files. The inconsistencies. The video. The metadata. And most importantly, the pattern. News outlets picked it up within hours. Not all of them, some hesitated, some buried it, but enough. Enough to create friction. Enough to force attention. And once attention locked in, control started slipping. I watched it unfold from my apartment, the same place where everything had collapsed days ago. Only now, it felt different. Not safe, never safe, but active. Like the space itself had become part of something larger. My phone didn't stop ringing. Lawyers. Investigators. Numbers I didn't recognize and didn't trust. I ignored most of them. Except one. External compliance. They didn't ask questions the way HR had. They didn't soften anything. They went straight for structure. Your materials indicate coordinated evidence fabrication tied to internal suppression mechanisms, the voice on the line said. Yes, I replied. We're verifying system IDs now. They'll match, I said. A pause. Not doubt. Calculation. Then this is bigger than your case. I looked out the window, the city moving like nothing had changed. It was never just my case. By the second day, the narrative shifted. Not completely, accusations like that don't disappear overnight, but enough. Enough for cracks to show. The audio was questioned. The screenshots dissected. Experts pulled into public discussion, pointing out the same flaws I had seen. The same stitching. The same unnatural patterns. And once doubt entered the public space, certainty collapsed. Evan disappeared. Not officially. But no one could reach him. No responses. No statements. Just absence. Which told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't the top. He was containment. And now that containment had failed, he was expendable. The real shift came on day 4. A statement. Not from the company. From a regulatory body. Formal. Direct. An investigation had been opened into systemic evidence fabrication and internal obstruction. Multiple cases. Not just mine. That was the moment everything changed. Because now, this wasn't a story. It was a case. I gave my statement 2 days later. Not to the public. To investigators. Hours of it. Every detail. Every file. Every connection I had mapped. They didn't interrupt. Didn't guide. They let me build it. Because by then, they already knew it was real. The accusation didn't disappear overnight. But it broke. Publicly, the original post was taken down. Then reinstated. Then flagged. Then dissected in ways that made it impossible to hold its original weight. And eventually, the sentence that had destroyed me lost its certainty. He sexually assaulted me. It didn't vanish. But it stopped being fact. And became a question. The lawsuit came after. Not just mine. Multiple. A chain reaction triggered by exposure. Wrongful termination. Defamation. Emotional damages. Systemic negligence. But mine went further. Because I didn't just defend myself. I proved intent. And intent changes everything. The settlement took months. Long, controlled, strategic months where every side tried to contain what couldn't be contained anymore. But the system had already fractured. Too many eyes. Too many questions. Too much proof. In the end, they paid. Not quietly. Not cheaply. A number big enough to make a statement. A number that didn't just compensate, it exposed scale. And when it was over, I walked away with more than money. I walked away with something they never intended to give me. Control. I didn't stay in the same city. Didn't keep the same routines. But I didn't disappear either. Because disappearing would mean they won. And they didn't. The messages stopped. From the unknown number. From everyone. Until one day. Weeks later. A final message came through. Same number. No introduction. No explanation. You did what I couldn't. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then typed back. Who are you? This time. No dots appeared. No reply came. Just silence. But I understood something now that I didn't before. This system. It didn't start with me. And it didn't end with me either. I had broken part of it. Exposed enough to make it visible. Dangerous. But systems like that don't vanish. They adapt. They rebuild. They wait. And as I stood there, looking out over a life I had rebuilt from something that was meant to destroy me, one thought stayed with me. Not fear. Not anger. Something sharper. More grounded. Because I knew, without question, if it ever tried to rise again, I wouldn't just survive it next time. I would be ready for it.